Smooth 98.1 FM. You're welcome to Freshly Pressed. Let's grab a copy of the paper this morning and you can be part of the conversation as we get along in the discussion. Be sure to send us WhatsApp messages on 0809 444 0981. The number once again to get the WhatsApp messages as responses to any of the paper headlines this morning will be on 0809 444 0981. Having said that, let's make welcome Devoe Okorie. Good morning to you, Devoe.
Good morning, Lagos. Good morning, team.
Are you doing any of the coups this
As
morning?
they say, a coup strike.
Oh.
Labor.
Is it a protest? I thought there's a difference between protest and strike right now.
Well, in this instance, I guess one will lead to the other.
Okay,
It
so
starts with a strike. So a coup protest.
Lagos, you met Devoe Okorie already, so I'd like to get on to Lakunle this morning. Good morning, Lakunle. How are you?
Good morning, Omas. Good morning, Lagos. And thank God it was a good Tuesday yesterday.
That's another way to say it wasn't a Black Tuesday. Averted. So let's get the copies of the papers now. I know I've been let into a secret about you. They say Lakunle, you like things that two can always split. That's saying you like even numbers. But let's begin with Devoe Okorie this morning. Devoe, shall we get into the papers this morning with the first story here from the Punch newspaper? It says Subsidy talks. Labour shuns federal government begins protests as oil workers down tools. Now, for a bit of it here, it says the two-day meeting between the federal government and the organized labor ended in a deadlock on Tuesday, with the Nigerian Labour Congress and the Trade Union Congress leaders vowing to begin a nationwide protest against the removal of fuel subsidy. This is where we are. Traditionally, every Nigerian will wait with bated breath and about to wait for midnight version, but that didn't happen, right? Take us through.
Well, we've been through a history of strikes, though it hasn't been at the strongest within the past 10, 15 years. However, what we see now is in our history of our country, there have always been reasons for the masses or the people to send a strong signal to government, more or less to protest. And this has usually is championed by the labor unions of the two which are the biggest, meaning the Nigerian Labour Congress and the Trade Union Congress. Now, granted this new administration and the economic reforms that were ensued with the removal of subsidies and also the FX harmonization between the official and the black market, and some other subsidies that are pending, like the electricity subsidy and some other taxes here and there. The labor unions believe that this has rendered immense hardship on the Nigerian masses who have been unable to cope. Now, hence the committees and negotiations that have been taking place till this point. Now, Labour believe that there was no commitment on behalf of the federal government in terms of providing cushioning steps, palliatives to be able to address some of these needs, that even despite the president's speech and appeal on Monday, that was not enough. So as of last night, like you mentioned, all those preparations that have been put in place, Labour, in their view, did mention that any attempt by anyone to rumor that they were not together, that was false, that the strike would still go on. Now, this actually started today, likewise as yesterday, the Pengasin, that's the Petroleum Natural Gas Senior Staff Association, workers went on strike against their regulator, that's the Nigerian Upstream and Downstream Commission, over inhumane practices that were being levied on many of their staff. Now, this is an indefinite strike, and that's the operative word here. Indefinite meaning there is no date put in place. It's not like a warning strike of 3 days or 2 weeks. This is indefinite, and they believe that government needs to act and show some form of commitment. Now, remember, this is coming on the premise of the president, who spoke out on Monday in his speech,
Yes.
and he unveiled why those economic steps were taken to address some of the leakages and graft that was going on in the industry. He also mentioned that since then, the country had saved about 1 trillion, and that the 500 billion naira palliative would be shared basically across manufacturers, small businesses, and farmers to see how they could address it. But I think, and also introduced the use of CNG powered buses, about 3,000 that were going to be provided. But I think whilst they were looking at increasing workers' salary, but I think all in all, because of the timeline in terms of the impact and the facilitation, that labor was not having it. So it had started already. On my way here, yes, even though many people have not been on the streets, it's been heightened even now with quiet streets and not much traffic.
Okay.
So we wait to hear the reports on how this is being
As it's
implemented
unfolding,
across
it's
the
just
nation. Yes.
still yet not 8 o'clock yet. So for a union that has been in discussion with the government for the past probably over a month now, the strike should have, if when it was announced, the removal of subsidy, we've gone past that bus stop already. Do you think any of this would change whatever we've achieved so far now, that the government will reverse back to the old price? What does NLC or the TUC hopes to achieve with this strike or protest?
One of the biggest pain points was that if subsidy was removed because there was graft taking place or corruption, then what it does is Nigeria is forced to import as usual because we don't have our refineries working. So Labor's own trade-off was that get our refineries working, give us a position plan, roadmap to where, as Nigerians, we can take control so that we are not left to the market forces that are driving petroleum prices higher. That's how long will Nigerians groan under petroleum prices? And I think that was one of their biggest pain points. Secondly, pending whenever that is addressed, because we know that is not a short-term plan. How will Nigerians survive? I mean, if you're saying you're going to grow 100,000 acres of agric or release grains, how far will that go? When will that be done? We obviously know that you cannot grow yam and cassava and even agbado and it's ready in the next 2 weeks. It doesn't work like that. So it's a strong message to the government to act and begin to implement, so that I think in a nutshell, the people need to see some what I call it level of traction on behalf of government, something tangible that will support the people in this time.
Well, Devoe, thank you very much for that very clear explanation. Now, getting from you, listening to you, it would seem you had the president's broadcast for breakfast before getting into the studio this morning. But I go to Lakunle right now with all of the explanation you've given now. Lakunle, let's get into this next story here. You would see this one here. It says from the Vanguard newspaper, it's more like a linking story. Blame DSS, the police for the fuel price hike. So says Ipman. The president of the Independent Petroleum Marketers Association of Nigeria, Ipman, said apart from the international pricing extortion by security agencies such as the Department of Security Services, DSS, the police, and arbitrary levies by government agencies were responsible for the recent hike in the fuel price from 537 naira to 617 naira. Hidden charges, right?
I'm a bit emotional about things like this. I remember sometime in I think it was in 1995 or nope, 1995 or 1996. The late Gani Fayemi brought a whiteboard into a TV studio that day, and he calculated the exact cost to produce 1 liter of PMS or to refine. I can't remember the exact, whether it was to refine 1 liter of PMS or to refine 1 barrel of crude. And it came down, that was just about the time when the government of that time increased fuel price from 3 naira 10 kobo to 12 naira. I think something like that. Now, so he brought the board for the records, Ganifa Emi wasn't an engineer, he wasn't a mathematician, he wasn't even a lecturer, he was a lawyer. So if a lawyer, and you know what people who eventually go into arts say, at least in my time, they say, maths is difficult, I don't want to do sciences. So let's assume he was also one of those people who said maths was difficult, I didn't want to do science, so I would go into the arts or into whatever. So he calculated for us what that cost was, or an estimation of what that cost was, right? And we're able to see that, okay, so if you move from 3 naira, 10 kobo to 12 naira, that means the government had a margin of about 7 naira on every liter of petrol. That was then. So if we interpolate, say, okay, 7 naira that time, between 3 naira, 10 kobo and 12 naira, okay, what is the price now and whatever it is? That means that we can also get that margin on it. And everybody says, for example, in that thing, says there was something they called road tax. There were many names they called those things that gave us, that they gave us to arrive at that 10 naira, right? To that 12 naira that year. So now, where are all those monies? And those are the monies this person is referring to here. All those taxes that they built into it. You know, there's one they said there's a bridging chemical, there is a road tax, there is infrastructure. All those monies were built into that cost that we were paying already. So it's not really that there was a reason for these things. So if they suggest that, let me read verbatim what the man said there. He said, he further called on the government to instruct all its agencies to put a stop into arbitrary charges built into the price of fuel, which means that even the 617 naira we pay today, there are some charges that have been built, that have been built into that thing, that it means that even we at 800 naira to the dollar, 1 liter of payment should come to us less than maybe 500 naira, whatever it is. So it is that thing that this man is alluding to. If this is true, then the problem is even bigger than subsidy removal.
That's what I'm looking at. How did the DSS get into this story, and the police now adding to the cost of extortion into this pricing of petrol?
So we're not even talking of on the road ones. We're talking of the official price here.
Yes.
Here. No, the on the road ones are like, have you been to Apapa? Do you hear the complaints those tanker drivers give every time they have to go in and come out of that place to lift fuel? Yes, we'll say that some of them are may not be true, they may be exaggerations and all that. But we hear these stories every day, how it is, how things work in that axis, right? But let's stick to the official one. So if you have had agents, so for example, custom goes to this thing and say that for every ship that lands that brings fuel, there is a cost to me for inspecting. This is the cost. They agree. Put the cost into what the eventual cost will be. Police says, because I'm providing security, this is the cost to me. So add this cost to it for me. And so on and so forth. We're not even talking of the unofficial ones. This is the official one we're talking about. So if government can then, so you see, it suggests to me that the problem is even bigger than subsidy itself. So that's where we are, and we need to look at this. This is the kind of things the National Assembly should be talking about.
All right. So thank you very much, Lakunle. I want to say once again, you're listening to Freshly Pressed on Smooth 98.1 FM. You can be part of the conversation by sending us some WhatsApp messages on 0809 444 0981. I see the messages piling up already. So, Devoe, I'll come to you shortly, but let's quickly take a look at some of the messages that's come in for us this morning. This one says, "Good morning, team. The fuel subsidy removal has been the way to go, but there are no implementable plans to support the after effect of the removal. Then they do not mean well for the people." That is what this person has to say. He didn't add his name to the message. I see this one from Emeka. "Oil workers downing tools is meaningless since our refineries are not functioning. They should force the presidency to fix our refineries." Emeka from Ikeja. Who else will be here for us? I see this name here. Let's see. Ifeanyi Ukwolise. It says, from Iba, "Top of the morning to you, the great guys in the studio. The federal government should revert to the old pump price of fuel instead of window dressing tactics they are contemplating, or they should refurbish the moribund comatose refineries. Not to the sharing of palliatives or selective payment of money to some people." and the messages keep raining in. A quick one before I go to Devoe.
Quickly, to correct an impression, when they say oil workers there that goes on strike that affect us, it's not really the refinery ones. Those ones are minimal in the number we're talking about. When Pengasan and the other one, Nupeng, go on strike, we're looking at the people who are in the upstream sector. That means that they shut down your production. We don't have crude oil to mine and then to sell for the number of days they are on strike.
Okay, so Devoe, let's pick up the Punch newspaper once again, and this one says the federal government orders probe as test flight plane crashes on Lagos road. In your usual rhetoric, you would say who has been, well, I don't want to get into who has bewitched the country this morning, but who do we have to thank for this, and walk us through that story?
Who do we have to thank?
Yes, if usually you would go about looking for who has bewitched the country, so who do we thank for this?
Well, it was a what I call a hazardous incident that took place yesterday in the likes of a film, but it wasn't a film; it was actually real. And if there's any gratitude, it's for the fact that no life was lost. And for those who captured the video, which has gone viral, a test flight propeller plane with about 2 passengers, that's the pilot and another person, crash landed into the Oba Akran area of Lagos in Ikeja now, and literally burst into flame as it crash landed around 3:30 p.m. Now, obviously, Lagos does have an advanced emergency response system. So literally every organ of that framework or that system was on ground. The Nigerian Safety Investigation Bureau also did confirm the incidents and that they confirmed that it was a test flight. The Director of Public Affairs and Consumer Protection did mention that investigation has started into the incidents. The director, Lagos State Fire and Rescue Service, was also on ground to support the little fire, but said that though the passengers were injured in various degrees, that luckily the rainfall helped to douse the fire because it was actually near a gas pipeline. Now, the Director General also of the Lagos State Emergency Management Agency did confirm that when it happened, they were on ground to assist the emergency response. Now, the governor also was on ground after, and he mentioned and he commended those who were around and how they reacted in terms of containing the incidents, especially for 2 residents of Lagos, called Oluwafemi and Okorie, who braved the fire as against those who were running to save to help save the lives of the occupants of the aircraft.
All right.
Now, whilst like I said, we commend Lagos State government, and this safety response should be carried out literally in every other sphere of life, because there are hazardous safety conditions, unsafe conditions around Lagos. Number one, Apapa Tinkan Island with all the petrol tankers and heavy cargo utility trucks literally that have blocked the road. Those are safety hazards for those who live and those who pass those areas.
Okay, that leads me to Lakunle. Lakunle, the paper in front of you is the Nation newspaper, and your headline there is telling you that El-Rufai is back after some 20-something years at the Senate when he was first confirmed for appointment as a minister. But the headline here says, El-Rufai proposes stringent measures for electricity sector. Take us through the story.
It's a bit interesting to note that the Bureau for Public Enterprises, BPE, became popular with us in its early days when I think Nasiru El-Rufai was also the Director General, the founding Director General of BPE. And the interesting thing was that the BPE was the first organized or body of government who sat to produce a privatization document for the power industry. And he had a few private sector people support him in building that document. And as students of government in those days, we were excited that we were going to stop saying up NEPA, up NEPA. That was about 25 years ago now, counting. And now we're still where we are. We're still singing up NEPA. Even the child that's born, one of the first words the child says is up, learns to say is up NEPA. Now, it will be interesting to see. Of course, he was just interviewed. We don't know the portfolio is going to be given to him. Well, it will be nice to see that since this is the question he answered, and I listened to him, and it sounded brilliant as always. That's my opinion of him. His emotional intelligence not called into question. His brilliance at propounding solutions to the problems that faces us in Nigeria. I was a beneficiary of his time as a minister of FCT, and I saw what he did where I lived in Abuja in that time.
You got plots of land at this time?
No,
I lived. Let's clear that out quickly before someone calls you out.
I lived in Abuja and I saw that he helped to maintain the beauty that Abuja was supposed to be. Okay. So
quickly, the
issue now is it will be interesting to see if and when President Bola Tinubu attaches portfolio and is giving this ministry.
Okay.
So that he activates and acts out these theories he has propounded, particularly around metering.
Why are you okay? I think the but you will settle after this time.
No, the truth is it's a political scenario, yes. However, this is a candidate, though brilliant, has a lot of baggage.
Well, the baggage, they will go into the screening after this time. But Devoe, your paper looking at you, the Vanguard now calls for your attention. Food sufficiency, federal government distribution of farm inputs to farmers. That's what the Vanguard says. And I remember you talked about all of the food that can grow in a day. And you mentioned even agbado. So walk us through that story in about a minute and a half so we can get to the messages, a pile of it.
Yes, basically, the federal government is already, this was a plan that had been in place ahead of this government in terms of the distribution of farm inputs to farmers. And it's commenced through the Federal Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development on Tuesday. The permanent secretary was speaking on how this would take place in terms of the project plan, and that the idea was to boost food and nutrition security, to attract private sector investment, reduce post-harvest losses, as well as add value to the local agricultural produce. Now, what they mentioned was that they were distributing inputs in the first phase of the Agricultural Transformation Agenda Support Program, phase 1, okay? Now, being funded by the African Development Bank, right? And this was the pilot phase whereby inputs would go around 36 states, but in this initial phase, it was to reach about 5 states within the north. Now, the first objectives did cover, I think, reaching out to some of the local governments, okay? Now, they said that the aim was to reach 60,000 farmers in 5 states. That's this first phase. Now, giving them these inputs helps them subsidize their production costs, right? Now, whilst this is a good move, okay? And they mentioned that the federal government's committed to paying 80% of the total cost of the inputs package. Now, inputs, for those who don't understand, have to do with the fertilizer, have to do with the seed. Seed is almost the most important part of farming. As they say, if you eat everything that you harvest, you have nothing to plant again. And for those who don't earn much from the little that they harvest, it's a big fight. You need to be in that room. So most times when the federal government supports farmers in this realm by giving them even hybrid seeds that help them improve yield, this greatly helps the outputs at the end of the day. Now, what was not said in all of this was the security matter, although that's not for the Federal Minister of Agriculture.
Yes.
But the truth is, no matter the brilliance of the support and inputs, if farmers are not safe to be able to go to farm, if they're not safe to be able to tend to their farm or even harvest, as we know, they've been under a lot of attack, we may not get to the success of this program.
All right, well, that looks like a very fine note for us to see what our listener is putting into the platform. Now, let's quickly go to this one. Rezi says, it is not the sharpest labor that's responding to the labor headlines we have had in history so far. Protesting against subsidy removal is not even something the ordinary Nigerian will be behind. They can't get their messaging right. The president has gotten ahead of them. This protest will fail because the people will more readily believe the government than that's labor. They should go and negotiate their wage increase and quit embarrassing themselves. That's a candid advice from Rezi. I would have loved to know the location he's sending this from, but then the next person here comes in with this message is Shegun. Shegun says NLC's political wing said they will remove subsidy immediately if they won the elections. Therefore, it should have been removal before palliatives, which is what is happening right now. They would have gone on strike from the first week of June if they hadn't been stopped. The government is now rolling out palliatives. Can they allow the palliatives to make an impact? And what are state governments doing? That's from Shegun. What else do I have here? This one from Dan Okuda from Igondo. Good morning to the crew. The DSS is becoming increasingly notorious for the wrong reasons. It needs total reorganization. Let's squeeze this one. Victor in from Lagos says petrol is sold in my village in Akwa Ibom State for 900 naira per liter. It has been like that for 2 months running. So let's get on to this next headline because we're winding. Lakunle, this is yours. So let's do this in about a minute. Immigration to introduce new visa regime, economic trust visa. That's according to the Daily Trust.
All right. So the acting Controller General of the Immigration Service has come with a new visa regime. Economic trust visa means that the immigration would investigate a proposed partner of a foreign investor to ensure that the foreign investor is not swindled. My first thought, okay, so the immigration is going to set up its own investigation department. What happens to interagency cooperation? Just like Devoe just alluded to about Ministry of Agriculture and security of. So if we don't have interagency cooperation, why are you setting up an investigation unit? Why are you building a new silo? It means that you're going to have a new whatever. Exactly. There'll be places where you go to where there'll be some laws that prevent you from doing them and so on and so forth. Are you going to change the act that sets up the immigration service to accommodate that and so on and so forth? Then, mind you, she's acting. There was a policy before her. She's acting. If and when she's confirmed, she would leave. The next person will also come and start a new thing. Why do we always have new leadership, new policy every time? Why can't we see through the one that's on ground? Why can't we fine-tune the one that's on ground? Why are we creating new ones every time? And then we start from ground zero all over again.
In our defense, Nigerians have said there's been a noticeable improvement in the rollout of passports, Nigerian passports lately.
I agree with you. I'm speaking to this idea that I'm saying, okay, so for me, I would rather say this, we have noticed that this happens. Okay, so we are going to invite the DSS, the police, the National Intelligence Agency, whatever security agency, and we're going to be feeding them information about this thing for them to give us a feedback before we do this. Why are we setting up our own? That's the question I'm having about that. But it's okay. Let's see how it runs. I wish her good luck and all the best in her tenure as acting and maybe permanent controller general.
So we'll go back to the messages to sum up because we are on the home stretch already. So Aisha says, please, the government should put standards in place for those doing illegal refinery to regularize their processes and become legal. We need modular refineries. They can even give interested parties loan to start off or have a percentage in their businesses. Then government can tax them appropriately. So it is a win-win for all. I see next, Emeka Onelum says, from Amuwo, surviving Lagos can now become the grace of God, has now become the grace of God. We dodge keke, we dodge Danfo, we have to dodge planes too. Secondly, why do Nigerians tend to gather at crash sites? It's dangerous. And secondly, they will tamper with the evidence that helps solving the cause of the crash. This message I don't know the reason why I would say it would not be the star message for this morning, but honestly, thanks so much, Emeka Onelum, for the message from
It's-
Amuwo.
It's a very, very valid observation.
Sums up everything.
It
very
sums
well.
up everything. We don't know whether there was some gas that maybe people that rushed there have inhaled. But of course, the flip side also is that two people approached the thing to help
And they
the
rescued.
survivors to come out. So there's a mix in all of these things, but we need to be careful around those kind of
Okay,
things.
it looks like a very fine morning now to say thank you
We
to
like drama.
Devoe Okorie. So at this point, I would say thank you so much for being part of the Freshly Pressed this
Merci
morning.
beaucoup.
Lakunle, thank you so much for being such a good company.
It's my pleasure.
It's been all a great time having you guys. I want to say thank you to Dan Okuda, Shegun, I see Man, Emeka Onelum, Ifeanyi. I see all your messages, Yinka Bolu, and all others. Stay tuned. After this timeout, we'll be in the locker room with Tega.
We're done.
What did you say?